out, highlight something you learned from somebody else or yourself.
Sure. One of the ladies in our breakout talked about these daily check-ins, and that they actually have dedicated staff to make that follow-up on anyone who may be in crisis or in need or any type of support, or to even notify teachers to keep them abreast. I thought that was really great to do that on a daily basis.
Okay. Awesome, thanks. And we'd love to see any examples. You can share them in chat, share them in that folder. I know lots of schools are wanting to develop those systems, so.
We talked about how we don't currently have a system that works to identify kids' engagement. If you look at attendance, it doesn't necessarily tell you why the student is not in attendance. It doesn't tell you if they're disengaged or if they've never shown up. If you look at our BER data, that doesn't tell you either. And if you look at our Tier 2 request for assistance form, so all of our existing ways that we kind of take the temperature of our kids' needs aren't giving us specific information about why they're not engaged, if they aren't engaged. So we talked in our group about creating a specific form that asks, that teachers would fill out to say, like, I've never had contact with this student, or the student logs in and their parent has them come for some and not for others, or the student logs in and is kind of taking themselves in and out of instruction. So we're talking about whether we funnel that through our office referral electronic form, but it's a separate category, not discipline, or if we create a different form. And it just seems like a lot of different forms and a lot of work for teachers. And we're thinking of ways to streamline it.
Yeah. I don't know if Cindy is on here today, but there is an example in that shared folder from Sandburg Elementary. And they, in the spring, they might have updated their system now, but they were using a Google Sheet. And each classroom teacher had their own sheet and all their students listed, and then they had different ways of contacting. So that might be one example to look at and kind of see how they were trying to organize. And then that way their support staff could also look there to see which students they might need to reach out to. So it was also the kind of their communication. So that's an example you might want to look at. All right, Diane, I think I'll turn it over to you to lead us into thinking about check and check out.
Okay, can you see this all right? You can see my screen? Okay, so what we're gonna do is my next section is just gonna cover check and check out and a little bit what it might look like in a remote setting. It is possible to be able to still provide that extra support students need even though they're learning remotely. So again, this is going to kind of focus around the items 2.6 in the TFI, which is ensuring that your check and checkout system allows for additional time and student skill development. You know, it provides for that additional structure and predictability, that increased feedback on a daily basis. So you probably have seen this at maybe a Tier 2 or a check and checkout training. You know, what's at the core of check and checkout? It's just Tier 1 at higher dosages. And I'll go ahead and put that up there as well. It's just providing all of those behavior-specific praise statements that we use at Tier 1 to students who need that additional, more than what we can provide at Tier 1. So they need it at very specific times throughout the day. It's also using those error corrections, giving that very specific and brief feedback around their behavior, again, at very specific times throughout the day. So they need what we're already doing at Tier 1 in the way of behavior-specific praise, of good error correction. They just need it in higher dosages, and it's higher doses of positive adult attention. So if we're doing it at Tier 1 universally with all of our students, then it makes it pretty easy to provide that feedback to students that are in our classroom that are on check and check out. So again, it always, you kind of reflect back on, are we doing this at Tier 1 to be able to easily do this effectively with students in check and check out at Tier 2. So this visual, this slide is just showing what the check and check out implementation process looks like from the time that a student is recommended for check and check out till the fact that we implement that. Hopefully within about a 72-hour turnaround time, we're going to get that student actually in the intervention. And then you'll just see the cycle of The morning check-in. Student picks up the daily progress report card, checks in with their check and check out facilitator, or if you call them a check and check out coach. I've worked with schools that call them check and check out mentors. They're going to meet with that person that they see at the beginning of the day as well as the end of the day. They're going to pick up their daily progress report card. That person's going to make sure that that student's ready to go off and have a successful day. They have everything they need. They have materials, they have their homework, they've got their books, everything they need to go off and have a great day. They're going to review what those school-wide expectations are, what the expectations are for that student. Now they go on about their day and they're getting regular teacher feedback after every class period or after every time that's been defined on their daily progress report card. Whether that DPR says period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whether it says morning activities, reading, math, however it's defined, at the end of that particular period, that student's going to receive regular feedback from the teacher. That is the intervention. They're going to get that behavior specific praise when they were respectful and they were responsible and safe during math class. If the teacher needs to correct an error, they're going to use those error correction statements with that student as well to help them understand why maybe they're just getting a 1 or why they're getting a 0. But they're getting that feedback regularly throughout their day. In the afternoon, they check out again with their facilitator at the end of the day, kind of review how their day went, and then parent feedback. We want to make sure that we have a homeschool communication piece set where that student can bring some type of a communication home to the family, so then they can get feedback from the parents as well on how their day went. And then you'll also see here that you've got your check and check out coordinator who's going to continually look at that data from those daily progress report cards and use that data to help make decisions on, where students need to progress with this particular intervention. Once they're in check and check out, doesn't mean they're lifers, doesn't mean they need to be on for the whole school year. We're going to look at data over a 4 to 6 week period of time and then assess, is that student going to continue in the program? If we have everybody mute, please, that would be awesome if you could mute your mics. Whether we need to revise that and modify that in some way, or whether they've shown enough progress that they're ready to transition off and graduate from check and check out. So we make those decisions based on that data from those daily progress report cards. This is a technical assistance brief that's available on PBIS.org website, and it's all about adapting check and check out for distance learning. So we always want to keep those critical features in mind. What we saw on that first slide when I started this section is it providing for those positive interactions with adults? Does it provide for that additional structure throughout their day? Are they getting that specific feedback continually throughout the day? Really a valuable brief if you're looking for how we're going to start to adapt check and check out within our school in a remote situation and distance learning. This is a great technical assistance brief that you can access on PBIS.org. We know that as we start to look at some considerations around kids in check and check out in a distance setting, we know that some students that maybe needed check and check out in a school setting in the physical building may not need it in a home setting. And then others who didn't need it when we were on site in our building may really need this and need that extra support during distance learning. So we really have to reassess the needs for behavior support. It can be something formal, it can be something informal, such as a periodic check-in with families. How are things going? Are the students able to log in? Do they stay focused in the Google Classroom or in your Zoom classroom? Are they getting assignments done? Are they contributing? So, what kind of data are we tracking to indicate that a student might need some additional supports in a distance learning setting? And we want to be a little bit flexible with our ratings. Who's providing that feedback to the student? How often is it being provided? It may look differently than it does when kids were in school. You may not have as many different times that you're giving that feedback. So we're going to show you on the next slide an example of what that might look like in a distance setting. But we may need to revisit those point goals. So we know that it's going to look a little bit different than when they were on site, when they were in school, in the classroom. So we have to take a look at it, making sure that we revisit those point goals. We indicate that plan change in our data system. So wherever we're keeping this data, we want to indicate that this DPR looks different. So you can track and know exactly what time period we were providing this support and this data in a remote learning setting. Engage the families, have them be part of this process. You know, you can include some home routines and home chores and things they're supposed to do at home on the DPR as well. So definitely kind of involve those families. There's a training script that's available from the Michigan MTSS that is a teach model practice format with families and helping them give feedback to their students. So I'm thinking if you click on that in the slideshow mode, it might take you to that as well. Here's an example, again, from the Michigan MTSS. You can see, and this is in that brief, that you'll see a couple of different examples of remote learning distance check-in, check-out. So you see the school-wide example, the school-wide expectations, those are going to stay the same. Respectful or safe, whatever your school-wide expectations are, those are the expectations you want on your DPR for remote learning. But the frequency of check-ins may not be as frequent as they were when we were in person. So in this example, you'll see morning circle, you'll see live instruction, independent reading, math app, and homework. So it's going to look differently than think of when they were in person, and it might have said periods 1 through 7, or it might have said reading, math, science, whatever. It's going to look a little bit differently. And then you'll see at the bottom there the examples: morning routine, remote instruction, free time. So they're giving feedback around free time. Here they're involving what kids are doing at home, chores, and then they have a bedtime routine. So just a couple nice examples. And again, we've got also some other examples on our website as well for you to take a look at on check and checkout cards, DPR cards for remote learning. Engage others. Think about who else could participate and help give feedback to students on check and checkout. Those can be done via phone. It can be done via Zoom. You could use breakout rooms such as we're using today for individual feedback. Include families. If you're doing a video conference or you're going to give that student that checkout feedback at the end of the day, see if you can get a family member on and engage them in those video conferences. And then just think about other personnel in your school that could help with giving feedback as well. If you have a paraprofessional or a co-teacher that is in your Zoom classroom with you, your Google Classroom, they can assist their aid and enlist them in giving students feedback as well. So we want to just make sure we're flexible. This may or may not happen daily. It's just going to look differently than when they were on site. And again, there's a link to some information from the Michigan MTSS that will give us additional adapting check and checkout for distance learning video examples. Just again, as we think about how we're going to provide this feedback, what that's going to look like in a remote setting, use your technology for the ratings. How are we going to keep track of these scores from a daily progress report card? Do we use a Google form? Do we have Swiss? Do we have the check and checkout Swiss app, that application in the Swiss suite, where we can then take this data and enter it into check and checkout Swiss? Think about recording it on some shareable electronic form. Think about, again, expand by those ratings. It could be a family member, could be other school staff, maybe the student themselves. Work with families to help determine incentives. That's going to look differently too in a remote setting. So kind of work with families to identify some no-cost rewards. Some examples, if the student achieves their goals for the week, earns their points, hits their targets, then maybe they choose the family meal for Friday night, or what movie they're going to watch over the weekend. Or they could maybe do a video or a phone call with a favorite teacher. So it's just adapting just some of those incentives and rewards, because it's going to look differently when kids are learning from a distance. And then we want to just make sure we point this out to you as well. This is available on YouTube. It's kind of lengthy. You see there, it says it's 50 minutes. It's Leanne Hawken did a whole video, a YouTube video around virtual check-in and check-out. So I strongly suggest that you watch it, at least part of it. She's amazing. I've worked with her directly. I've learned from her in person, and she's one of the co-authors of Check and Check Out from way back in the day. And so it will be a valuable resource for you as you start to look at developing and adapting your Check and Check Out to a virtual setting. So we're going to send you to breakouts, and just kind of real quickly, what I want you to share with each other is, you know, are you right now in the process of modifying and providing check and check out supports to students virtually? How do those kids receive feedback? Or if you're in the planning stages, what is it going to look like when you actually kick it off? How often will students receive that feedback? How will you engage families? So I really want you guys to connect and share with each other on what this already looks like in your school, what your plans are for when you're starting to roll it out. Just really, this is a great time to connect with each other on what check and check out in a virtual remote setting looks like. So I'm going to stop share, and I am going to open breakout rooms and give you guys probably at least a good 5 minutes to do this networking and sharing, because I think that will be valuable time. So if we're good to go, I'm going to open rooms. How many longer, Katie? You froze. Katie just froze on me. Maybe if it's longer, that's fine. We'll just, oh, somebody has to come back in the room. Okay, everybody's heading to rooms. Katie, you froze for a second. Was it longer than 5?
Yeah, I think let's give them more like 10 minutes. We had originally
Perfect.
like 15,
Perfect.
so I think 10 is
okay.
a few
So about
more.
3:16. Okay, perfect.